In order to fully understand vaccine hesitancy and how we can develop strategies for vaccine promotion, we must discuss the role misinformation plays in vaccine hesitancy. Despite all evidence that vaccines are safe and effective, some individuals still believe vaccine misinformation. Why is this misinformation attractive? And why is it more attractive than public health information and scientific research? Well, when people encounter information or misinformation, it is accessed and processed in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs, attitudes, values, worldviews, and identities. We'll go through 3 processes that provide insight into this phenomenon: selective exposure, selective perception, and selective retention. Selective exposure is when individuals seek out consonant, supportive, and congenial information. Essentially, individuals opt for confirmatory information and avoid non-confirmatory information. For example, someone who values alternative and homeopathic medicine might seek out websites aligned with these values while avoiding sites that do not align. The next phenomenon is known as selective perception. This occurs when individuals encounter a message and then perceive it in a way that fits with their pre-existing attitude. In other words, when this phenomenon occurs, individuals hear what they want to hear. More specifically, non-confirmatory or non-supportive information is dismissed, while confirmatory information is overvalued. So it is important to keep in mind the extent to which an individual who is hesitant about vaccines might dismiss evidence that a vaccine is safe and effective and instead rely on misinformation about the vaccine. Selective perception can also manifest through something called the hostile media effect. This is the perception that the message source itself is biased against one's point of view. It is important that those of us communicating about vaccines keep this in mind, as it is possible that those we are hoping to speak to could mistrust our message. Selective retention is a third process to help us understand how misinformation can be appealing. In this process, individuals are more likely to remember components of a message that support their pre-existing attitudes. So here, we could see how an individual might be more likely to remember information about a vaccine's side effects, while neglecting to recall information about the vaccine's benefits. The common thread in these processes relates to how new information, or misinformation, fits in with an individual's pre-existing attitude, worldview, value system, and so on. Recall that people are motivated to defend these things. Discordant or non-supportive information can be perceived as threatening to these constructs that are so important to who we are. It is important to note, though, that not all discordant information is perceived this way. These processes are more likely to occur when one's belief is connected to a broader worldview, value system, or identity, or it facilitates belonging to a social group. However, oftentimes people are simply motivated by a desire to be correct. For many people who are vaccine hesitant, they simply want to make the decision that will best protect themselves or their children. In this case, these processes are less likely to occur. There is one additional and fascinating phenomenon related to misinformation that can occur, something known as the continued influence effect. In this phenomenon, misinformation can continue to influence judgments, attitudes, opinions, behaviors, and so forth, even after it is corrected. In a study demonstrating this effect, participants were first exposed to misinformation about a vaccine and were then provided a correction. Findings from the study found a continued influence effect in which people were nonetheless hesitant to vaccinate their child despite having viewed the correction. Why does this happen? Well, when misinformation is initially believed, it can fit into a mental map, essentially our mental representation of how things fit together and connect. So, for example, if someone is exposed to misinformation that vaccines cause autism, This could connect to other beliefs about vaccines being dangerous or having unsafe chemicals in them, beliefs that the pharmaceutical industry is not to be trusted, and ultimately be used to formulate a negative attitude about vaccines and potentially even a decision to not vaccinate one's child. So when we provide accurate, corrective information that vaccines do not cause autism, we may see an individual accept that individual correction and update that single belief, but fail to update all of the other beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors it was used to form. So this is why we say the initial incorrect belief has a continued influence on these other factors. Now, if you are wondering how we will ever communicate effectively about vaccine safety and efficacy, don't worry. Recall that only a very small portion of individuals feel so strongly about vaccines that they refuse all vaccines for their children. Most folks who feel hesitant about vaccines simply want to make sure they have accurate information in order to best protect their children or themselves. So, as we'll discuss in the next section, there are plenty of strategies to help inform our vaccine communication.